Chapter 8: The Great Interpreters. Aristotle did not travel through history by walking alone. He traveled in other minds. Centuries after the Lyceum, long after the dust of Athens had settled over other empires, readers kept finding Aristotle waiting for them. Dense, difficult, sometimes luminous, sometimes maddening. His works were not easy companions. Many of them seemed like lecture notes rather than finished books. Arguments appeared in compressed form. Examples belonged to an ancient world. Some treatises had survived by accident and editing, while others were lost altogether. To make Aristotle live again, later thinkers had to do more than copy him. They had to interpret him. That is why the history of Aristotelianism is not the history of a single doctrine being handed down unchanged, like a sealed jar. It is the history of powerful readers who opened the jar, found strange and potent materials inside, and mixed them with the questions of their own worlds. Three of those readers stand out: Avicenna, Averroes, and Thomas Aquinas. They did not belong to Aristotle's lifetime. They were not peripatetics in the original Athenian sense. But they became some of Aristotle's most consequential heirs. Through them, Aristotle entered Islamic philosophy, Jewish and Christian debate, medieval universities, theology, medicine, metaphysics, and the long scholastic effort to show that reason could climb toward truth without betraying faith. Each man met Aristotle under different skies. Avicenna, known in Arabic as Ibn Sina, was born in 980 near Bokhara, in the Persianate world of Islamic learning. He was astonishingly precocious, a physician, philosopher, court intellectual, and author of vast works. His world was not a museum of Greek thought, but a living civilization of translation, commentary, medicine, mathematics, theology, and political danger. Greek philosophy had come into Arabic through translation movements centered especially in Baghdad and other learned circles. Aristotle arrived there not as a pagan relic, but as a demanding instrument. He offered logic, categories, natural philosophy, and metaphysics. He offered a way to organize knowledge. Avicenna took that instrument and changed its music. One of his most influential moves was the distinction between essence and existence. Ask what a horse is, and you are asking about its essence, its whatness, the structure by which it is the kind of thing it is. Ask whether a horse exists, and you are asking a different question. For ordinary things, Avicenna argued, essence does not automatically include existence. A horse can be defined whether or not this particular horse is standing in the stable. A triangle can be understood whether or not someone has drawn one in the dust. Created things are possible in themselves, they require something else to bring them into actual being. From this distinction, Avicenna built a metaphysical road toward God. If the world is filled with beings whose existence is not necessary in themselves, then their existence must be explained. The chain cannot finally rest in another merely possible being. It must reach what Avicenna called the necessary existent, that which exists not by gift, accident, or dependence, but by its very nature. Aristotle had spoken of an unmoved mover, a highest actuality drawing motion, as an object of desire and thought. Avicenna transformed this inheritance into a more explicitly theological architecture, one that would shape Islamic, Jewish, and Christian philosophy for centuries. This was not simple repetition. Aristotle had given him tools: substance, cause, act, potentiality, form, intellect. Avicenna reorganized them around a question that pressed urgently in his world: how can reason speak about God, creation, soul, and contingency? His answer was an ambitious synthesis. Philosophy, medicine, psychology, and theology belonged to a single ordered search. His work on the soul also carried Aristotle forward. Aristotle's De Anima had treated the soul as the form of a living body, the principle by which a thing is alive, perceives, desires, and thinks. Avicenna took this starting point, but emphasized the soul's immaterial powers and its capacity for self-awareness. His famous floating man thought experiment asks us to imagine a person created fully formed, suspended in air, with no sensory contact at all. Such a person, Avicenna argues, would still be aware of his own existence. The point is not a modern experiment, it is a vivid philosophical scene. Self-awareness cannot be reduced to bodily sensation alone. For later thinkers, this was electrifying. Avicenna helped make Aristotle speak to questions about consciousness, immortality, and the relation between body and intellect. His medical canon shaped medicine for generations. His philosophical book of healing was not a manual of comfort, but a vast attempt to heal ignorance by ordering knowledge. If Avicenna was the great synthesizer, Averroes was the great commentator. Averroes, or Ibn Rushd, was born in Cordoba in 1126, in Muslim Spain. He was a jurist, physician, philosopher, and judge. He lived at a crossroads of cultures, where Arabic learning, Jewish scholarship, and eventually Latin Christian curiosity formed a complicated intellectual frontier. To many later European readers, he became simply the commentator, just as Aristotle became the philosopher. The title tells us how closely his name became attached to Aristotle's. Averroes believed that Aristotle had achieved the highest form of philosophical science available to human reason. That belief gave his commentaries their extraordinary seriousness. He wrote short, middle, and long commentaries on Aristotle's works, not as casual summaries, but as disciplined efforts to clarify what Aristotle meant and defend the power of demonstration. Where Avicenna had built a grand system with Aristotelian materials, Averroes often tried to strip away what he saw as later distortions and recover Aristotle's own arguments. He also defended philosophy itself. In a religious world where some theologians distrusted the philosophers, Averroes argued that the study of nature and being was not an enemy of revelation. If truth is truth, then genuine demonstration and rightly understood scripture cannot finally contradict each other. Difficult passages may require interpretation. Different people may grasp truth at different levels, some through rhetoric and image, some through dialectic, some through demonstration. But reason remains a noble and necessary path. This defense mattered far beyond his own city. Through Latin translations, Averroes entered European universities like a spark in dry straw. Students and masters in Paris and elsewhere encountered Aristotle often through Averroes's explanations. They also encountered controversies, especially around the intellect. Averroes's view of intellect is complex and much debated, but one version associated with him suggested that the possible or material intellect is not privately multiplied in each individual in the way common sense assumes. Human beings participate in an intellectual principle that is in some sense shared or separate. To Christian theologians concerned with personal immortality and individual responsibility, this sounded dangerous. If there is one intellect for all, what becomes of my soul? What becomes of my salvation? What becomes of my own knowing? The arguments were technical, but the stakes were intimate. Medieval thinkers were not debating abstractions for sport. They were asking what it means for a human person to think, to know truth, to survive death, to be accountable before God. Averroes forced those questions into the open. Even thinkers who rejected him learned from him. He made Aristotle unavoidable, sharper, and more troubling. His commentaries became bridges across languages and religions. Jewish philosophers, including Moses Maimonides and later Jewish Aristotelians, worked in the same broad world of questions about law, reason, creation, and divine attributes. Christian scholastics wrestled with Aristotle partly because Islamic and Jewish thinkers had already shown how deep the wrestling could go. Then came Thomas Aquinas. Thomas was born around 1225 into a noble family in southern Italy. He became a Dominican friar, much to his family's frustration, and entered the intellectual life of the medieval university. By his time, Aristotle was no longer a distant rumor. Translations had poured into Latin. So had the commentaries of Avicenna, Averroes, and others. The result was both excitement and alarm. Aristotle offered a powerful account of nature, logic, ethics, and metaphysics, but he was a pagan philosopher. He did not know Christian revelation. Some of his doctrines, or doctrines attributed to him, seemed to threaten Christian teaching. Aquinas' achievement was not that he baptized Aristotle by sprinkling holy water over Greek concepts. It was subtler and stronger. He read Aristotle with immense care, learned from the Islamic commentators, disagreed with them when he thought necessary, and built a Christian philosophical theology in which reason and faith could stand in ordered relation. For Aquinas, nature is real and intelligible. Human reason is wounded but not worthless. The world is not a trick or a distraction from God, it is creation, and therefore it can be studied. Aristotle's four causes, his account of act and potentiality, his understanding of form and matter, and his confidence in ordered explanation gave Aquinas a philosophical grammar. With that grammar, Aquinas spoke about God, angels, human beings, sacraments, law, virtue, and politics. His famous 5 ways show the method at work. They are often called proofs of God, though they are better understood as brief roads of reasoning. Aquinas begins from features of the world: motion, causation, contingency, degrees of perfection, directedness toward ends. He argues that these features require a first source, unmoved mover, first cause, necessary being, highest good, intelligent governor. Aristotle stands behind these arguments, especially in the language of motion, causation, and finality. But Aquinas' destination is the God of Christian theology. In ethics, Aquinas drew deeply from Aristotle's vision of virtue. Human beings become good not by isolated wishes, but by habituated action, guided by reason. Courage, temperance, justice, and prudence matter. Practical wisdom matters. Friendship and community matter. Yet Aquinas adds theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, and places human flourishing within a supernatural horizon. Aristotle's eudaimonia becomes, in Aquinas' world, incomplete unless open toward beatitude, the final happiness of union with God. In politics and law, Aquinas also transformed Aristotle. He accepted that human beings are social and political animals. Law should guide people toward the common good. But he framed natural law as participation in eternal law. The rational creatures share in divine wisdom. This gave medieval Christian thought a powerful way to speak about moral order. Human law is not mere command. It should be measured by reason, nature, and the common good. Aquinas did not agree with Aristotle on everything. He rejected any view that denied creation, providence, or personal immortality. He opposed Averroist interpretations of a single shared intellect. He corrected Aristotle where Christian doctrine required it and where philosophical argument, in his judgment, demanded it. But his respect was enormous. In Aquinas, Aristotle became a central teacher of the Latin West. The influence was institutional as well as intellectual. Medieval universities trained students in logic before theology. Disputation required definitions, distinctions, objections, replies. Scholastic method may seem dry to modern readers, but at its best it was a disciplined theater of fairness. State the opposing case strongly, answer it carefully, distinguish where needed, avoid confusion. Aristotle's logical works helped shape that practice. His categories and syllogisms became tools of academic life. The story does not belong only to Christians and Muslims. Jewish philosophers also drew from the Aristotelian stream, often through Arabic sources. Maimonides, though not one of our 3 main figures here, deserves to stand in the background of any honest account. His Guide for the Perplexed wrestled with Aristotle, prophecy, law, negative theology, and the tension between philosophical truth and scriptural language. The Aristotelian inheritance was not a single road, but a network crossing religious communities. What joins Avicenna, Averroes, and Aquinas is not agreement. In fact, their disagreements are part of their greatness. Avicenna gives Aristotle a metaphysical system centered on essence, existence, and the necessary existent. Averroes gives Aristotle a fierce defense as the master of demonstrative science and forces later readers to confront hard questions about intellect and interpretation. Aquinas gives Aristotle a Christian home without letting him rule unchallenged. Together they show how influence really works. A lesser tradition demands obedience. A greater tradition provokes creation. Aristotle's ideas survived because they were strong enough to be argued with. His account of nature could be extended by physicians and scientists. His logic could become the skeleton of university education. His metaphysics could be used to speak of God in Arabic, Hebrew, and Latin. His ethics could be recast into theories of virtue, natural law, and moral formation. His politics could help later thinkers ask what law is for and how the common good differs from the advantage of rulers. Modern criticism rightly notices the dangers in this inheritance. Scholastic Aristotelianism could become rigid. Reverence for Aristotle sometimes hardened into intellectual obedience, slowing acceptance of new science when observation outran ancient theory. His teleology could be overextended. His social assumptions about women and slavery were carried too long by people who should have known better. No tradition this large is innocent. But the great interpreters also preserved something liberating, the trust that reason matters. They believed human beings can ask what a thing is, why it exists, what it is for, how it changes, and how our lives should be ordered in response. They believed arguments could cross languages. They believed faith need not fear every question. They believed inherited texts are not dead if a living mind meets them honestly. Picture Aristotle's works leaving Athens as scattered scrolls, passing through libraries, translators' rooms, courts, monasteries, mosques, synagogues, and universities. A physician in Persia pauses over the soul. A judge in Cordoba writes a commentary late into the night. A Dominican friar in Paris dictates replies to objections. None of them is Aristotle. Each changes him. Each saves him from becoming only ancient. That is the deeper story of the proponents. They were not echoes. They were resonant chambers. Through them, Aristotle's voice grew larger, stranger, more contested, and more durable than anything the Lyceum alone could have produced.